Hey, welcome to the ReThink podcast. Glad that you're taking the time to join us as we discuss this children's story. Jonah. My group last night was talking about the fact that we thought we knew the story.
Yeah.
Such a simple little story, kids' church, kids' books, whatever, VeggieTales. There's a lot of depth here. And so we have gone through a chapter at a time. We were just told that, we could probably go back through this a chapter at a time again and come up with completely new messages, different layers, different depth. Good stuff. So we're gonna wrap up the discussion of Jonah today. I think it's appropriate that we do a fast recap. Anybody want to do that? I should probably also say that not on camera, besides the four of us, we have our friend again we don't know how to describe him. He's our friend. Maybe that's sufficient. Who knows a lot about Israel and Jewish life and Hebrew culture and studies the Talmud and really brings some context to us. But he's our friend. So
I think it's part of the reason why this story has come to life again for me. Just as far as I knew the story really well, I thought. Mm-hmm. And then our friend told me that I didn't know the story.
I was a little more correct stating than that, but
no, you don't know this.
As Jeff mentioned, there are so many layers, and you just can't. The more you read, the more you look, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, how did I miss that after multiple times of going forth and
it's because it's God's story.
Right, and kind of the summary for 4 is basically, this ain't about Jonah, this ain't about a fish, this ain't about, this is God, and who the salvation comes from the Lord, and he's picked out these horrible people from this horrible place and said, you need to go take a message to them, my message.
I've been sitting down with our kids reading this story, and we've been trying to read it pretty much every night to them, the same story, so much to the point now they roll their eyes. But we've been summarizing it like
That's probably what people are doing right now.
Probably. Viewership is going down. We've been telling them in chapter 1 that God talks to Jonah. In chapter 2, Jonah talks to God. In chapter 3, God speaks through Jonah. In chapter 4, they sit down and have a conversation. That's why we've been trying to share it with them. Mm-hmm. So,
and I appreciate what you shared with me last week, that you're not, like I said, popping in a video digital disc. I'm not technologically proficient, folks, just to let you know that. Pencil and paper is way too far for me. Anyway, but you're not reading it from your phone.
Yeah.
You're picking up the book that Daddy talks about all the time, and you're letting your children see that this is where you go to get information from. This will help you in your life. There's going to come a time whenever they're going to go, yeah, I'm not listening, or I'm not doing this, or can we talk about something besides the fish, Daddy?
That's already happened, yeah.
But when they're older, what does the Scripture promise us? They will return to it. So kudos for that.
It doesn't go out without a harvest. It's a lot of validity. You talked about that last week.
Well,
the power of the Word.
Yeah. And we spent a lot of time in this podcast talking about how, it seems like there's a generational gap, like we're not going to the Word as often as we should. Mm-hmm. And so I think, that's a simple place to start with your kids. Mm-hmm. Yeah. A few mornings or a few evenings talking about it, reading from it. And I love what you're doing with your kids now. Your oldest kid is teaching your younger kids. Mm-hmm. And it's just a picture of what we want to see.
Actually, really well. So, our household is a little different just because of who I am and how I process the word and everything.
They do burpees in between verses.
Yeah, no. So
they mess up a reading, they have to run laps.
Yeah, exactly.
Those who can't teach Jim.
It's really good for me because I do. Having our friend here, I'm teaching Old Testament right now, so I'm swimming in the deep end of the pool that I'm probably not qualified for, but
that's the best place to be.
It is. It's that iron sharpening iron thing. So at one end of my day, I'm swimming in the deep end with all kinds of stuff no one really cares about, right? Except me, probably. Yeah. And then I go home and I got to figure out how to take all of this and translate it into a simple message that a 10-year-old can figure out. So it's a good practice for me. But with our children, we have our oldest is, reading the story, and then what we do is have him come up with 11.
11. Okay.
Come up with questions that go throughout the story, and so he's asking questions to his sisters and brothers, all the way down to a 5-year-old. So even for him, he's having to process a story, understand it himself, and then be able to ask questions. And we take turns with our 2 oldest reading and asking questions, so that they get the practice of. Anytime you ask a question, you got to understand it yourself.
That's right.
Yeah.
So
There is nothing like teaching to help you learn. Nothing like it.
man.
Yep.
Right. So every book that that's why I love to teach straight through a book, because when you teach the book, you learn the book.
Yeah.
At least a layer of it. I shared with our life group this past week, we're going to start Wednesday night with how to study the Bible class, and my whole group is going to come and learn that process that we worked through from David Platt. I told them at the conclusion of that, my hope is that they will, as a group, pick a text. And I don't care what it is, just pick a text and let's study that together, applying these methods. And then I want each of them to lead a night, and teach, facilitate really the discussion. And boy, a lot of them freaked out. Right? I'm not coming to class. But it's not as, I understand the nerve or whatever of some of that, but there's nothing better than communicating what you have learned. That solidifies that thought in your mind, and that's the benefit of just doing this. It adds another opportunity for us to communicate truth, and it helps to solidify it in our heart and mind, and holds us accountable.
Yep.
Having said all that, let's jump into this great story. I think I want to begin by just reading. There's just a few verses here. Let's just read the wrap up of it, and then we'll talk about some themes that resonate with us. Chapter 3, verse 10. So Jonah goes and he preaches this horrible sermon, but the people listen. When God saw that they did, and how they turned from their evil ways, he had compassion, and did not bring upon them the destruction that he had threatened. But Jonah was greatly displeased and became angry. That's going to be the main topic of chapter 4, isn't it? He prayed to the Lord, "O Lord, is this not what I said when I was still at home? This is why I was so quick to flee to Tarshish." Excuses still rolling there. He has never said I did the wrong thing. He just got turned. "I knew that you are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger, abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity." Such a whiner. "Now, O Lord, take away my life, for it is better for me to die than to live." But the Lord replied, "Have you any right to be angry?" Jonah went out and sat down at a place east of the city. There he made himself a shelter, sat in its shade, and waited to see what would happen to the city. Then the Lord provided a vine and made it grow up over Jonah to give shade for his head, to ease his discomfort. And Jonah was very happy with the vine. But at dawn the next day, God provided a worm. This is a setup, isn't it? I love it. He provided a worm, which chewed the vine. So it's kind of like God provided the storm. God provided the sea creature. God provided, God's providing. The worm. God provides a worm. When the sun rose, God provided a scorching east wind, and the sun blazed on Jonah's head so that he grew faint. He wanted to die, and said, "It would be better for me to live than to die." Again, second time.
for me to die than to live.
What did I say?
Better to live than die.
Oh, that's backwards.
Yeah.
Really
Very
changes.
important.
Really changes the story.
Yeah, very important.
Better read what it says. I was just thinking about the worm, actually, when I read
I was
that.
thinking about the sun beating down on his head.
Does anybody else have that problem? You're reading words and you're thinking about other words?
Yep.
Boy,
all the time, every Sunday?
I used to be able to think on 2 tracks at the same time. Yeah, now they just.
Wait till you add a 6th generation or more onto that, like me, and then it don't get better, boys. I'm just telling you.
Thanks for the encouragement.
Well, since I'm probably old enough to be at least 2 of you's father, and the two people sitting on the end are together don't match my age. So anyway,
It would be better for me to die than to live. But God said to Jonah, do you have a right to be angry about the vine? I do, he said. I do. I'm angry enough to die. I think this guy's crazy. You ever meet anybody like this?
Yeah, I have kids.
Irrational. Yeah.
You
Children.
give something and you take it away.
Oh, blessed be the name of the Lord. The Lord said, you have been concerned about this vine, though you did not tend it or make it grow. It sprang up overnight and died overnight. But Nineveh has more than 120,000 people who cannot tell their right hand from their left, and many cattle as well. Should I not be concerned about that great city? And we leave it at that. How does Jonah respond? We don't know. So what's your thoughts on this story, Andrew?
There's three
You're
questions
sure?
I have for our friend whenever.
Three?
Go ahead.
Oh, we got a lot to get through.
Well, I was just thinking, you got to back up to verse 1. Anytime a sentence starts with but, you should really take note of that.
Transitions. God's
Right?
Yeah.
So what is Jonah, what does Jonah see that's very wrong? The fact that they
repented.
repented,
God,
right?
Yeah, God relented.
Yeah. And so why is he angry about that? Because that seems like that's our goal, right? Well, I'm going to just put a little history out there. So
You sat down with our friend already this week?
I have not, well, we did. But
Be careful, lightning coming down, folks.
that's right. We
All
talked
right.
about some stuff, but not this. This is actually from what I'm teaching in Old Testament.
Oh,
so.
all right.
But Jonah is prophesying during the king Jeroboam, northern kingdom, he did not follow God. So set up idols. So that's why also even in like the previous chapters when he talks about worshiping idols and that if they lay down their idols, like there's idol worship going on all over in the.
Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
We went to Tel Dan. They're out in the woods. There's the stone structure where they raise the golden calf.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So
That's what it's talking about in the story.
Yeah. So there's idol worship going on here in the northern part. They're not following God, but the northern kingdom has secured their like wall and everything for the kingdom, so they're living in safety and security and prosperity. So why is Jonah upset? Because everything Israel wanted at this point has been given to them, and God's been faithful. So why in the world would these other nations be included in the promise of Israel? And so there's the rub is like, God, like, we're supposed to be your people, not them. Like, we deserve your blessing, not them.
Well, even more specifically to the people of Nineveh, the Assyrian Empire, the first prophecy that you see from Jonah giving in 2 Kings is, hey, fortify the northern kingdom's walls against who? The Assyrian Empire.
Yep.
And so it's so ironic and such a picture of God's compassion because the same people that Jonah was prophesying to protect Israel against, now he's being sent out to give them the word and bring them back. And, man, that's just what a picture of the grace of God.
And so here the prayer after that, or in verse 2, is he prayed to the Lord. Isn't this what I said, Lord, when I was still at home? Like and we're going to talk about this. He knows God, but he doesn't know God, and that's like a big practical application. Moving on here.
One of our group members last night brought up a discussion she had from a college class where they read The Shack. You remember that story a few years back?
Yeah.
The Shack?
Yeah.
I didn't care for it too much, but there are some good thoughts, at least, in that. One of them she shared, I thought, this is pretty good. What was the person really comes before God and says, I want justice. I want justice in this situation. And the situation was that their child their life had been taken away. And the person is pleading with God to bring justice by taking the life of the person who took the life of their child. And that would be fair, right? And God responds in the story. Again, not a biblical story by any means, but it does make a point of who God is. God responds by saying, well, don't you understand that your child and this person who murdered your child are both my children? Mm-hmm. And so you're asking me to choose which one will live or die based upon your perspective, but they're both my children. And I think we run the risk of that sometimes, and they definitely in this story had run the risk of that, Jonah particularly. You're not the only chosen child of God. All of creation is God's. Every person is God's, and he loves everyone the same. He chose them to be a vehicle to accomplish his desired end of redeeming everyone. Just like he's chosen us and is using us to share the message of the gospel to others. We're no more special. We're a vehicle now to share that good, special message.
Yeah, he's stuck in what you said in week 2.
Yep.
Grace for me, law for you.
Yep.
Like, give grace to my people, law to everyone else.
Yep.
It's a dangerous place for your heart to be.
Yeah. Man, you can see that on display in our culture like crazy. You know, there's different divides, different categories that people fall in, and you want that grace for your category of people, and yet the people who are doing things that you don't like or are against your category, you want them held to a different standard than you are, and so. Yeah, we like to read the story of Jonah and be like, man, I can't believe this is how he acted. And it's like, we are Jonah.
Well, I think. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so this concept continues
That's 4
to play
questions
out.
for our
Like in the teaching of the Pharisees and everything in the New Testament, when Jesus gives a parable about the talents, right? So 3 different amounts are given, right? What is fair? God gives to however he wants, and also the farmer, you know, the ones that go out early in the morning and work all day long.
Yep. Everybody joining the task.
Called
end
at
of the day gets the
different, at
same.
different times, and your
Gets the
salary is
same-
the same.
same
You
salary.
agreed to work for a day's wages.
Yeah. Yep.
Whether you start at 8 a.m. or 3 p.m., you get
Fair.
your denarii.
So yeah, fair is in the eye of the one who defines what fair is, and so God is the one who sets what that is. So grace, right? Same concept here. And Israel, the people of Israel have struggled with this. We struggle with this today. I guarantee if you play that story out in America, like that would just flip people out, like, but that's what Jesus is trying to communicate here is like the grace and the mercy is for like all, right?
That's what he said. Jonah even got that. I know that you are gracious, compassionate, slow to anger, abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity. On me? No, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't deserve
And
trouble.
and that's what
but
I think.
them.
That's what I think is incredible about this, because he knows God in here, but he's forgotten God here. He's quoting Exodus 34.
Yep.
He's quoting Mount Sinai here, Moses. He knows who God is enough to quote him word for word, but he doesn't know God in his heart. And I think that's the trap that religious people fall in all the time. We've been taught that if we know enough about God, that it will save us. But you can still know a lot about God and have a bad heart, and it's still dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jesus spoke pretty harshly to the Pharisees, and he
Matthew
talks
chapter 12. That's what he's doing when he talks about Jonah.
It's exactly right.
People who had a bad heart.
Yep. They knew, like, they kept all these things. They knew the law. They knew the word, but they didn't live it. It didn't transform them because he says, if you've seen me, you've seen God. Like, that's a big statement, right? And so Jesus' miracles, his life is all on display. And they knew the word, but they didn't recognize what it actually looked like.
And isn't it interesting that Jesus contrasts the Pharisees with the Ninevites in that story? It's like the people who in the culture around them seemed like they had it all together, knew all the right answers. Then on the other hand, they would have known about the atrocities that the Assyrians would have done in war, and yet Jesus lays it out. They'll stand up at the judgment and judge this generation, and what he's inferring is that
Something
you
greater.
won't. Yeah.
Because they turned.
Right. Yep.
That's what God's after.
So
Turn
whenever
back to me.
Andrew and I were talking about this, I think it stemmed off a conversation you had on Tuesday with our friend. But you were talking about him leaving the city after the prayer and going east.
Yep.
Let's talk about that.
East, when you read in the scriptures, most generally always refers to a holy thing. If something comes from the east, you brought up
Messiah's coming from the east.
right, he'll return to the east gate where they've made a cemetery because he can't walk through dead people if he follows the law. He
Right,
was the
right.
law, blah blah. But not to discount that point, but so when this week's Torah portion was actually the story of Passover, Exodus 12, and we're down to the last 3 plagues. And what does it say? Where did the locusts come from? God developed a Velmet east wind and blew in that. The same thing here we had kind of gone over with. The wind came from the east, and you're going to have a classically trained meteorologist read that and go, well, it's called a Scirocco, not cute little VW vehicle that was a hoot to drive, but which is what it was named after, by the way. But so now it says, and Jeff hit that a while ago. And in our version, it specifically says, God prepared. Okay, this wasn't the superheated air came from the mast, come down the mountain, went across the desert. It was hot. It was dry. It was a scorcher, for lack of a better word. It wasn't a aberrant atmospheric abnormality. My God sent it.
What did he just say?
I'm gonna have to re-listen to this later.
It wasn't natural. It was God
not.
ordained.
It was not.
There you go. God ordained.
God provided. God prepared. Yeah. Back in chapter 1, I thought the word was he actually blew. Mm-hmm. It actually says he hurled down that storm. Is what this scripture version says. So yes. So now we see it's from the east. That always should trigger your mind. It's holy. It's from God. And then same token about. Even though they were actually west of the city, I guess, like you said, in your, not the podcast version, but the live version, where you can get somewhere east by going west, but you're going to go a long way to get there. Mm-hmm. Kind of like Jonah. You can take the Uber fish, or you can
follow God.
Yeah, and your sermon.
So he goes east. What were you going to say?
Go ahead.
I was going to say he goes east, and he sits down. Essentially has a conversation with God. And I really think that this comes down to a point of lordship in this moment. God who's in charge. Mm-hmm. And it's like he's sitting there. I know protest is a bad word in our culture today, but that seems like what's happening here. Like he's like, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to wait for 30.
Pouting.
Yeah, I'm going to wait for 39 more days.
And in your live version, Sunday, you brought up a key element. You guys talk about, well, this was a bad sermon, and it's just like you said, okay, he's met the Lord, he's been in the bowels of hell, he's been spit out. I'm going to go do it, but I'm going to do it my way, and I'm going to just walk in there, and, these are abhorrent people. 40 days, you're going to be toast, all right? Gone. And he doesn't tell them how to repent. He doesn't tell them what's required. He doesn't. I think that's where we start in chapter 4 is now the realization has come to him that if I don't repent of this, I know I've sinned against the Lord. I know I'm supposed to bring this message. And then in the last chapter we read that, well, begrudgingly, I can just hear him I wish you to kind of develop that a little more. I could hear him arguing in his head, all right, I'm going to do it. Kind of like when you're 4-year-old, you tell them they're going to do something, and the lip comes out and the foot drags, and they'll walk over to put the cup of food in the dog bowl, but it's all the time they're thinking, nah, Dad ain't going to make me do this forever.
Yep. Yeah.
Same principle.
So a few lines of thought out of that. So Jonah goes to the east, away from the city, right, into the wilderness to wait upon judgment, 40 days. Anytime you hear 40, it's a number of...
There's two things. Yeah.
Large
East
and complete.
40.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Jonah's in the east, waiting for judgment, sitting in his easy chair. Not really, but... and then, so you look at, like, the Christological overtone of that. Jesus goes into the wilderness 40 days to prove that he can take upon our judgment. He's the perfect sacrifice. So there's always this picture, like, pointing to the New Testament of Jesus is the better Moses, Jesus is the better Jonah, Jesus is the better...
Matthew 12, something
law.
greater's coming.
Yes.
Yep.
The fulfillment of all this. Jesus is the picture of that. And so you have that overtone going there. But then you also have, like, what our friend talked about is all of these things are prepared for Jonah. So in Jonah's... I I can really relate to Jonah. It's like, I've done all these things, right? Like,
I know all these things about you.
don't you like want to bless me because I've been faithful, right? Like that's what he's thinking is like, God, like I'm your people. Like you've promised these things to us. I've done what you've told me to do. I know who you're. Come on, like that's kind of the mindset,
It's
right?
like I've done what you've told me to do. Now you do what I want you to do.
Yes.
Yep.
And all the time, God knows exactly what Jonah needs to really be best for his life. So when God causes the east, he provides. He provides a picture of his grace through the vine, but he also provides for Jonah the worm and the wind because he knows what's best for Jonah to restore Jonah to a right relationship with him. It's a heart issue at this point. And so God is always more concerned what's best for us in relationship
Long
to
term,
him.
eternally.
Yes. Than in our physical, material world of right now.
Boy, I hate the health. I'm sorry, but I'm going to say this. The health and wealth gospel stuff. I hate that because it's so here and now, right? It's what's best for me, what feels good in the moment. And that's not consistent with what God provides almost anywhere.
So just you got to. That's why understanding what's going on in Israel, they're living in prosperity and comfort right now. Listen, their greatest threat was not persecution;
It's themselves.
it was materialism.
Yeah.
Well,
that
Jonah-
was their greatest
Jonah cares
threat.
more about the plant than he does the people.
Exactly.
Because
Comfort
the
with
plant was
prosperity.
shade.
Yep.
He'd rather he's mad because he doesn't have shade. All the while, we have 120,000 people who are finding eternal salvation.
And he won't go in and teach to them. Yep.
I'm
It's
so angry
things
about
over
this
people.
plant being destroyed, but I could care less about 120,000 people being
120,000
destroyed.
people and their cows mean
Yeah.
nothing to me. I was comfortable. Now it's
Yeah.
kind of you don't want to tell the story grotesquely to your children, but you mentioned in your sermon exactly the point. I'm sure most of you grew up from the Bible school story where you see Jonah in the whale sitting in the easy chair lounger in front of a fire, eating and enjoying life,
Yeah.
and
smiling with a
you-
bonfire
yeah,
going on
you
his
know,
tongue. and
there's
it's just-
Cooking a fish that the fish.
yeah, inside a
How do you
fish.
sound inside the
There's an analogy that we could talk about for 4 podcasts. But so yes, right on the money. And like I said, when your children are 4, you probably don't want to go through the grotesqueness of some of this. But and to Jeff's point a while ago,
Blumker's kids are digesting fish or dissecting fish at home.
Fun fact:
a
whale
young-
vomit is actually one of the most expensive per kilogram substance in the world.
Wow, you only find that here on the
Wow.
podcast.
Folks,
This is the
this is the-
content that keeps people coming back.
Yeah, there's actually trained dogs that go around looking for whale vomit on the beaches. Just
I
in
hope
case
that
you were-
finds a way into your sermon
I
this
hope
weekend,
so,
too.
Why in the world do we know that?
We don't.
Yeah.
I guess we do.
We're
now.
all just
we
learning.
I guess
do.
we do now.
and I thought studying 20 hours of 2,500-year-old text to help you out was beneficial. All I had to do was think,
This is
find
really
a
what
dog
we're
that
looking
knows
for.
whale vomit.
Yeah, this is
Here's
what
the
we're
other
looking
fun
for.
fact about that is after 3 days, right? No, this is crazy. After 3 days, it goes from smelling sour to smelling sweet, and it's used in perfumes. So how many days did Jonah walk?
Now that part I did know that I had read that there was an excretion from the whales
Yep.
that was bottled for perfume. I
Yep.
would have never equated it with
How sweet is the smell
parfaroo.
of the ones who bring the good news? I'm just saying. Like,
Is that how that goes?
it's how beautiful the feet.
And I think we should break for a word from our sponsors
my
here.
goodness.
Holy moly!
Okay, let's back up and talk about.
I don't even know where to go.
I don't either. You were
Whale
talking
vomit.
about the tent.
Yeah. The
Let's
booth.
The booth.
The
booth.
shelter.
Let's talk about that. Because that's one other question I had for our friend.
Let him answer.
Yeah. You
What is
describe
this?
that.
What's the significance potentially of this? He built a shelter.
Okay, so and once again, in my translation, it says a booth, and
There's a feast of booths.
right there is a feast of
Leviticus
booths,
23.
and this reply, and also the when you this ties with the Exodus story. Whenever they were traveling in the desert, they dwelled in booths, and it's called a sukkah, and the holiday is Sukkot, plural, and there are rules for this, and it's a flimsy structure. You have to be able to see your neighbor's house. It's open on top. You can put a couple palm fronds or what your building choice that you have, but you must be able to see the stars in the sky. What it relates to is, okay, we were talking earlier before we went live with our whale barf discussion, and now I'm
You're
gonna
welcome.
Be, now I'm going to be lost on my morally upstanding post here from me. But so the booth is, you are dependent upon the Lord God. There is no protection. We talked about how Nineveh was not only a walled city, but the castle was a walled place, and possibly there were other cities encompassed within the second wall. And then we digress to my junior high thing about the chariot race. But anyway, so you're depending on God for your protection. When you're the king and you've got the castle and you've got 20,000 guards surrounding you with bows and arrows and that, you're not living in the Word. You're not trusting God. You're depending on people, and to a point that works out. But here, this man is, like you said, he's suffering. He's wandered. He didn't do it himself, but he's heard the stories of how his people went through the desert and depended upon nothing but the hand of God to lead them through and to provide shelter and protection for them. So the booth is, that would not be a term that would be easily missed with, it's relatable, even in modern society.
So it's interesting that that word is included here, that he builds this structure signifying dependence on God. And God provides for him all the while this destruction, he's waiting to observe
He
destruction.
builds this structure, and then God provides a plant, and then God provides a worm, and then he gets angry again. You know? And I don't know if he ever really stopped being angry, but
You know, the humbling feeling I'm having thinking about this text in our culture is that the church historically has struggled when we live in a blessed culture, and we've talked a lot with each other. You see it all over Facebook about where are we heading as a people, as a country, and we've been blessed. We've been blessed in hiding behind our big walls, and God pouring the blessing on us. Historically, we see that the church really is impactful when it's persecuted, when it struggles, when the blessing is withheld. And I think it's because when we realize that we're in a booth and we really are dependent upon God, I mean, that's what matters, right?
Yeah.
We vote for economy over morality almost every time.
Yep.
yeah.
You know, that we choose self over others, and God doesn't bless that.
Yep. Yeah. You follow the storyline out, and Matt mentioned it last week in Nahum. Nahum is the next prophet that goes to Nineveh, and
60 years.
yeah, roughly a generation, and Nineveh is destroyed because of their idol worship and all the immorality that has creeped back in.
Yeah.
And I think it's so interesting. We talk about this dependence upon God. When we don't live in dependence on God, we start living in ourselves, and self always produces immorality. Like every time you go back to the garden, self is the issue there, and it's disobedience to God. And so Israel falls. They lose their prosperity and security. One generation later, Nineveh falls. And so it's this idea of living, and that's why Jesus says, pick up your cross daily and follow me. It's a daily relationship with the Lord, not a one-time moment. He wants a relationship with us that's alive and active on a daily basis.
And a lot of the commentaries that I've read in preps for this, they always end it the same by saying that the book of Jonah just ends, right? It just ends. But the thing is that it doesn't just end, right? It's the fact that what you said in week 1, that God is writing a bigger story, and there is one that is greater that's coming. Yep. And he's come. At that point he hadn't, but he has come. And you look at the parallels between Jonah and Jesus. Jonah has a bad heart. Jesus has a compassionate heart. It's just the parallels are incredible.
Yep.
But there was hope coming. So the story doesn't just end, because God is writing a bigger one.
Yep.
Can we wrap it up by reminding folks and ourselves that the commission of Jesus is to go? you've got good news.
Outside the walls.
Get up and go.
To people that
Because-
are even different than you.
Because here's what's crazy. God's doing something over there. And he wants you to go so that he can complete the process and bring redemption. Wow. All right. Thanks for joining us on the podcast. This Jonah story has been a blast for us.
So fun.
We've been challenged and learned a lot, I think. At least I have personally. We're going to move to, oh man, we're going to talk about love.
What is love?
What's love got to do with anything? 1 Corinthians 13 will be our topic for the next few weeks. And then we're going back to the Old Testament. I've already shared with our friend. He's going to have to come back because we're going to study Psalm 23. And there's just so much depth to culture and David. And wow. All right. Good stuff. Thank you for joining us.